Hey my nerds, welcome back. And we're breaking world building essentials again this week, but this time we're focusing on building a society independent of sunlight. Those of you who've read Saqqara Nights know this is a world building essential that I've played around with a bit before. Saqqara is a city of permanent darkness, so I had to find some way to get around the issues that are created when you don't have sunlight. I'll take you through the things you have to think about when breaking the sunlight essential, and I'll use examples from Saqqara Nights, but don't feel by any means limited to using them for removing the sunlight dependency if you give this a go yourself. First things first, the big one, photosynthesis. Simply put, plants require the energy they gain from sunlight to exist. This means either you have to create a species of plant that can exist without sunlight, such as by giving them a different energy source, which is tricky to do because concepts like that are very difficult to slip into your story's narrative in any kind of authentic way. Or you have to accept that plant matter won't be able to survive in the darkness and you world build around it. This is what I did for Saqqara Nights. The workaround became complex quite quickly, but it also yielded some fascinating results for the world building, such as how with no plants there are no trees, so no wood, which means you have to get very creative about a lot of the basics that you can no longer rely on in your story. You need to come up with alternative fuel sources for fires, other materials for buildings and furnitures, alternatives to things like paper. And wood, of course, is far from the only plant matter we rely heavily on. Without the sun, our crops won't grow, we won't have the medicines and nutrients that we rely on. So either you build yourself a race of people that don't need to eat or never get ill, or you will build an alternative source of food and medicine. This was why I integrated the fungi into Saqqara. They can cover so many of the same functions as plants, allowing for a fairly recognizable society to emerge despite the aesthetics being completely different. So the lack of light will cause some chaos when it comes to the vegetation, and that's not all. Light also provides heat, another essential, so either you break this entirely and you have a species that operates at low temperatures, or you provide an alternate source of heat. I got around this issue by situating Saqqara near a volcano, so the heat coming off from the hot springs actually helps heat the city. I also linked this back to the lack of wood for fires by having the citizens mechanize these hot springs to pipe boiling water into their homes for showers and cooking. The next issue a lack of light causes probably is one you can skip over entirely anyway, but I'm going to include it for the sake of completeness. And that's the minor issue of how humans need sunlight to survive. If we don't get regular doses, then there are all sorts of things that go wrong in our body, like depression and high blood pressure. So for your species to survive, they will probably either have had to have evolved a bit biologically different than us. You don't really need to go into this detail in the story and directly mention it, but if you feel like going the extra mile and building a species that has evolved to do this just fine without light, then you might find that there are actually physiological differences that you can slip into your story when you describe your characters, like their eyes looking different, or whatever you come up with, just to add a little bit of world-building flavour to it as well. Finally, there is one really painful issue that no light can cause you as an author. And this one is one that you're going to have to come up with a solution for, because otherwise you're going to have a nightmare time actually trying to write the story. Believe me, I've tried. Without light, we don't have days. Without days, we don't have weeks, months, years, and so on. We don't even have nights if we don't have days, because it would just be one long night. And if you're trying to write a story set in permanent darkness, then you need to think about how the society works in darkness if it doesn't have these markers to help keep time by. In our world, most people sleep at night, with small numbers of people working shift hours to keep essential services running. But in a permanent world of night, how do people know when to sleep? Do people keep to different hours, or does some semblance of our society always form with most people keeping the same wake-sleep cycle just for convenience? Without sunlight or sundials, how did the people in your world learn to tell time? How do they tell time now? In Saqqara Nights, I created a fungus that rotates in a sundial-like fashion, and people use that to tell the hour. I don't call a day in Saqqara. Saqqaran days are called turns, i.e. one turn of the fungus. I made this mechanism of timekeeping as similar as I could to ours because frankly, by that point I had already gone pretty far down the world building rabbit hole and I didn't want to cross over into the territory where readers just get lost by it all. So there you have it, how to make sunlight a non-essential in your world. This is the only essential I've broken so far in my stories, but if you go down it also, then let me know because I want to compare notes. All right, bye my nerds, see you next time.